Jake Williams adjusted his thrift store tie outside Sterling Analytics Chicago headquarters, clutching printouts of his self-taught coding projects. 2 years of night shifts at Amazon warehouses while raising 7-year-old Emma alone had drained his savings. Her asthma medicine cost $800 monthly, and their studio apartment rent was 3 weeks overdue. This junior data job was his escape from poverty. The interview panel, 3 college graduates, barely glanced at his work. No degree, no real training, laughed Brad Thompson, the lead interviewer. Look at this guy, thinks watching YouTube videos makes him qualified. The panel erupted in laughter. Sterling only hires from top schools. We can't have warehouse workers embarrassing us in front of clients. Jake tried to explain his projects. I've built several predictive models that... Predictive models? Jessica Miller interrupted, smirking. Did you hear that, Brad? He's built predictive models. In his garage, I'm guessing? This is what happens when people don't know their place, Robert Hayes added. We have standards here, Mr. Williams. Standards you clearly don't meet. They made Jake wait outside while they mocked his resume loudly enough for him to hear. Did you see his clothes? His answers? Completely delusional. Other candidates in the waiting room exchanged knowing looks and whispered among themselves. After 20 minutes, Brad opened the door with a dismissive wave. We'll be in touch, Mr. Williams. Don't call us. The rejection hit Jake like a physical blow, walking toward the elevator, his dreams crashing around him. Jake thought about Emma's face this morning when she'd asked why they couldn't afford the cereal she liked anymore. He had $43 to last until Friday, and Emma's inhaler prescription would cost $38 of those dollars. Every morning before his warehouse shift, Jake stopped at the corner where an elderly man named Tom sat quietly on a piece of cardboard. Tom never asked for money, never bothered anyone. Jake handed over his coffee and breakfast sandwich from the vending machine every day. $8 he couldn't afford to spend. $8 that should have gone toward Emma's medicine. His warehouse co-workers thought he was insane. You're an idiot, Williams, Danny had said yesterday. That old guy probably makes more money than you do. You got a kid to feed. Stop wasting money on some homeless guy. Jake never argued. He just kept doing what felt right, even when it meant going hungry. Tom always smiled gratefully and said, You're a good man, son. Good things come to good people. But as Jake walked past the main conference room after his humiliating rejection, those words felt like a cruel joke. Through glass doors, he saw 15 executives crowded around a massive screen displaying error messages and flashing red warnings. The Morrison Industries project crashed. $20 million down the drain, someone yelled. If we can't fix this in 24 hours, we're finished. Our best data scientists are stumped. How did this happen? Jake stopped walking. His warehouse-trained eyes automatically scanned the numbers on the screen. Customer identification numbers, engagement metrics, retention rates, all the concepts he'd studied during countless break periods. The same customer IDs were appearing multiple times in their database, inflating their engagement metrics by hundreds of percentage points. Their entire model was built on duplicate data. Jake knew exactly what was wrong. His phone buzzed with a text from his neighbor watching Emma. She's asking when Daddy's coming home with good news. Excuse me, Jake called through the door. Your system is counting the same people over and over. The room fell silent. 15 pairs of eyes turned toward him, with expressions ranging from confusion to outright hostility. Brad Thompson appeared in the doorway, his face red with fury. Are you kidding me? Security? This warehouse worker thinks he can solve what our Harvard graduates can't. Get him out of here, before he embarrasses himself more. But before security could arrive, a woman's voice cut through the tension. Wait. Sarah Sterling, the company's founder, stepped forward. She was in her early 30s with sharp eyes that seemed to see everything. What did you see? Jake pointed at the screen. You're counting customers 3 times each. That's why your predictions are wrong. You think you have way more loyal customers than you really do. The room went completely quiet. Sterling's team frantically began checking Jake's observation, their fingers flying across keyboards. He's right, whispered the lead analyst. How did we miss this? Sterling studied Jake carefully. I started with nothing before building this company. Show me what you mean on that whiteboard. Brad Thompson's face turned purple. Sarah, this is insane. He's a warehouse worker who got lucky with one guess. But Sterling ignored him, her eyes fixed on Jake. "You have 5 minutes to prove you're not just lucky." Jake walked to the whiteboard, his hands shaking. Emma's future depended on the next 5 minutes. He picked up the marker and began drawing the data flow that was causing their $20 million disaster. "Your customer table joins with your engagement table here," Jake explained, drawing connections between data points. "But you're not filtering for unique customer IDs. Every time a customer has multiple interactions, you're counting them as separate people." The room watched in stunned silence as Jake broke down their complex system into simple, understandable pieces. He showed them exactly where their model was failing and why their predictions were worthless. "The fix is actually simple," Jake continued. "Add a distinct clause to your customer count query and implement proper data deduplication before running your retention analysis." Sterling's lead data scientist ran Jake's suggested query on his laptop. The numbers on the main screen immediately changed, showing their actual customer base was 60% smaller than they thought. "This is impossible," the analyst whispered. "How did a warehouse worker see what we missed?" Sterling turned to Jake, her expression unreadable. "What's your name again?" "Jake Williams, ma'am." "Jake Williams," she repeated slowly. "You just saved my company $20 million. The question is, what do I do with you now?" Comment below if you've ever felt underestimated because of your background. Sarah Sterling stared at Jake for a long moment, the conference room silent, except for the hum of computers recalculating their broken models. "You just identified a flaw that our entire data science team missed. A flaw that would have cost us our biggest client and probably our company." Brad Thompson stepped forward, his face still red with anger. "Sarah, let's not get carried away here. He made one lucky observation. That doesn't qualify him for anything." "Lucky?" Sterling's voice was ice cold. "Brad, your team has been working on this Morrison project for 6 months. 6 months. And you couldn't spot a basic data duplication error. This man saw it in 30 seconds. Jake stood frozen by the whiteboard, marker still in his hand, afraid to move or speak. The executives around the table were staring at him like he was some kind of alien creature. "Ma'am," Jake said quietly, "I should probably go. I don't want to cause any more trouble." "Trouble?" Sterling laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Mr. Williams, you just prevented the biggest disaster in this company's history. The only trouble here is that we almost let you walk out that door." She turned to address the room. "Morrison Industries is our anchor client, $20 million annually. If we delivered this broken model, they would have terminated their contract and sued us for damages. We would have been finished." The lead analyst, a nervous man named Kevin, raised his hand tentatively. "Sarah, the Morrison presentation is tomorrow morning. Even if we know what's wrong, we don't have time to rebuild the entire model." Sterling's eyes never left Jake. "How long would it take you to fix this, Mr. Williams?" Jake's mind raced. He'd studied their system for all of 5 minutes, but the architecture was similar to projects he'd worked on during his self-taught coding sessions. "If I had access to your database and development environment, maybe 72 hours. But I'd need to understand your entire data pipeline first." 72 hours, Sterling repeated. "Kevin, how long would it take your team?" Kevin shifted uncomfortably. "To completely rebuild? At least 2 weeks, maybe 3. We'd have to audit every query, every data source, every calculation." Brad Thompson exploded. "This is insane. You're going to trust our most important client to some warehouse worker with no credentials, no experience, no what, Brad?" Sterling's voice cut through his rant. "No Harvard MBA? No family connections? No trust fund to fall back on?" She stepped closer to Brad, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Let me tell you something about credentials. I built this company from nothing. No degree, no connections, no safety net. Just intelligence, determination, and the ability to recognize talent when I see it." She turned back to Jake. 72 hours, Mr. Williams. Fix our Morrison model, and I'll offer you a position that will change your life. Fail, and we're all probably out of jobs anyway. Jake's phone buzzed. A text from his neighbor. "Emma's cough is getting worse. Should I take her to urgent care?" His heart clenched. Emma needed her medicine, needed a doctor, needed a father who could provide for her. This was his chance. Maybe his only chance. I'll do it, Jake said. Brad Thompson's face twisted with rage. Sarah, I'm formally objecting to this decision. When this blows up in our faces, I want it on record that I warned you. Noted, Sterling said coldly. Kevin, set Mr. Williams up with a workstation and full database access. Give him whatever he needs. What about security clearances? Background checks? Proper protocols? Brad demanded. What about results? Sterling shot back. Mr. Williams just demonstrated more competence in 5 minutes than your entire team showed in 6 months. As the meeting broke up, Jake found himself surrounded by hostile stares from the Sterling Analytics staff. These people made more in a month than he made in a year. And now he was being handed their most critical project. Kevin approached him nervously. Mr. Williams? I'll show you to a workstation. But I have to ask, do you really think you can rebuild our entire Morrison model in 3 days? Jake thought about Emma's trusting face, about the eviction notice, about Tom sitting on his cardboard every morning with nothing but dignity and kindness. I have to. Kevin led him to a small office with a computer and multiple monitors. The Morrison data is massive. Customer records, transaction histories, engagement metrics, behavioral patterns. It's the most complex model we've ever built. Can you show me the original specifications? Jake asked. Kevin pulled up a document that was over 200 pages long. This is what Morrison Industries requested. Predictive analytics for customer retention, churn analysis, lifetime value calculations, segmentation models. Jake scanned the requirements, his mind already breaking down the problem into manageable pieces. This isn't as complicated as you're making it. You're overthinking the architecture. Overthinking? Kevin looked offended. This model took our best people 6 months to develop, and it doesn't work, Jake pointed out. Sometimes the simplest solution is the right solution. As Kevin walked away, muttering under his breath, Jake sat down at the computer and began exploring the Sterling Analytics database. The data was messy, poorly organized, with inconsistent naming conventions and redundant tables. No wonder their model had failed. His phone buzzed again. Another text from his neighbor. Took Emma to urgent care. They want to keep her overnight for observation. Her oxygen levels are low. Jake's hand started shaking. Emma was in the hospital, and he was sitting in an office trying to save a company that had humiliated him hours earlier. But if he succeeded, he could afford the best doctors, the best medicine, the best everything for his daughter. He rolled up his sleeves and got to work. By midnight, Jake had mapped out the entire Morrison data structure and identified 17 separate issues beyond the duplicate customer problem. By 3 a.m., he'd written the framework for a new predictive model that was cleaner, faster, and more accurate than anything Sterling Analytics had ever produced. But he was working alone, in a hostile environment, with the weight of his daughter's future on his shoulders. And he had less than 60 hours left to prove that a warehouse worker could outperform Harvard graduates. The real test was just beginning. Jake had been working for 18 straight hours when he discovered the first problem. His computer access had been revoked overnight. There must be some mistake, he told Kevin, who avoided eye contact while typing at his own workstation. It says it's a security protocol, Kevin mumbled. New users need additional clearance for sensitive data. Jake's stomach dropped. He had 54 hours left, and he couldn't even log into the system. Can you call it? This is urgent. They don't come in until 9, Kevin said, still not looking at him. Jake walked to the break room to get coffee and overheard Brad Thompson on a phone call. I don't care what Sarah said. This warehouse worker is going to destroy our reputation. Do whatever you can to slow him down. The sabotage was deliberate. When IT finally arrived at 9:30, they claimed Jake's access request was lost in the system and would take 24 hours to process. Jake found Sarah Sterling in her office. They're blocking me, he said simply. Sterling's jaw tightened. Who? Brad Thompson. Maybe others. My computer access was revoked overnight, and it is stalling on restoring it. Sterling picked up her phone and dialed. This is Sarah Sterling. Restore Jake Williams' full database access immediately. Yes, immediately. I don't care about protocols. She hung up and looked at Jake. You'll have access in 10 minutes. But Jake, you need to understand something. Half the people in this building want you to fail. They see you as a threat to everything they believe about themselves. Why are you helping me? Jake asked. Because I was you once, Sterling said quietly. 28 years old, no degree, no connections. I built this company in my garage while everyone told me I wasn't qualified. I know talent when I see it, and I know what it looks like when mediocre people try to destroy it. Jake's access was restored, but the problems continued. Files he'd worked on overnight were mysteriously corrupted. His login credentials stopped working every few hours. The development server crashed repeatedly, always when Jake was making progress. By the second day, Jake had managed to rebuild only 30% of the Morrison model. He was exhausted, running on vending machine coffee and determination, sleeping in 2-hour chunks on the office couch. His phone rang. The hospital. Mr. Williams, this is Dr. Martinez. Emma's condition has stabilized, but we need to discuss her long-term treatment plan. Her asthma is more severe than we initially thought. She'll need a specialist, and the medication costs will be significant. Jake closed his eyes. How significant? The new inhaler alone is $1,500 monthly. The specialist visits, additional treatments, you're looking at about $4,000 a month in medical expenses. $4,000. More than Jake made in 3 months at the warehouse. Mr. Williams, are you there? Yes, Jake whispered. Do whatever she needs. I'll figure out the money. He hung up and stared at his computer screen. 48 hours of work, and he was barely halfway finished. Emma needed him to succeed, but Brad Thompson and his allies were making success nearly impossible. That's when Jake noticed something strange in the Morrison data. Customer records that didn't match the patterns he'd been seeing. Engagement metrics that seemed artificially inflated. Transaction histories that made no sense. He dug deeper and discovered the truth. The Morrison Industries data wasn't just duplicated, it was completely fabricated. Someone had been feeding Sterling Analytics fake data for months, making their client's business look more successful than it actually was. Jake's hands trembled as he traced the data manipulation back to its source. The fake records all had the same digital signature, the same creation timestamp pattern. Someone inside Sterling Analytics had been systematically corrupting the Morrison project from the beginning. And that someone was Brad Thompson. Jake stared at the evidence on his screen. Brad hadn't just been sabotaging Jake's work, he'd been sabotaging the entire Morrison project for months. But why would he destroy his own company's biggest contract? Jake's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Stop digging, or your daughter pays the price. His blood turned to ice. They were threatening Emma. Jake looked around the empty office. It was past midnight, and he was alone with his discovery. Brad Thompson wasn't just incompetent. He was actively working against Sterling Analytics. But Jake had no proof that would hold up, and now they were threatening his daughter. He had 24 hours left to complete the Morrison model, save Sterling Analytics, and protect Emma. And he was completely on his own. Jake made a decision. He copied all the evidence of Brad's sabotage onto a secure drive, then deleted his discovery from the main system. If Brad wanted to play dirty, Jake would have to be smarter. He spent the next 18 hours rebuilding the Morrison model from scratch, using only clean data and ignoring the corrupted files Brad had planted. He worked with a fury born of desperation, coding faster and more efficiently than he'd ever coded in his life. With 6 hours left, Jake had a working model that was cleaner and more accurate than anything Sterling Analytics had ever produced. But he still had to present it to Morrison Industries executives, and he knew Brad would try to sabotage the presentation itself. Jake's phone rang. Sarah Sterling. Jake, where are you? The Morrison presentation is in 2 hours, and I can't find your completed model anywhere in our system. It's ready, Jake said. But, Sarah, there's something you need to know about Brad Thompson. What about him? Jake took a deep breath. He's been sabotaging the Morrison project from the beginning. I have proof. The line went silent for a long moment. Are you absolutely certain? Yes. And he threatened my daughter to keep me quiet. Get to the conference room now, Sterling said, her voice deadly calm. Bring everything. Jake gathered his files and headed to what would either be his greatest triumph or his complete destruction. In 2 hours, he would face Morrison Industries executives with a model that could save Sterling Analytics if Brad Thompson didn't destroy him first. The Morrison Industries executives filed into Sterling Analytics' main conference room at exactly 9 a.m. Jake had never seen so much power concentrated in one space. CEO Margaret Morrison, a woman in her 60s who'd built a billion-dollar empire from a small family business. CFO David Chen, whose financial decisions affected thousands of jobs. VP of Operations Lisa Rodriguez, known for her ruthless efficiency. Jake sat at the far end of the table, his laptop containing the rebuilt model and the evidence of Brad Thompson's sabotage. His hands were steady now, but his heart hammered against his ribs. Emma was still in the hospital, and the medical bills were mounting by the hour. Sarah Sterling stood at the head of the table. "Thank you all for coming. I know the failure of our original model was unacceptable, but we've identified the problems and built a completely new solution." Brad Thompson leaned forward with a confident smile. "Before we begin, I think Morrison Industries deserves to know who's presenting today. Jake Williams here is a warehouse worker with no formal education, no credentials, and no experience with enterprise-level analytics." Margaret Morrison's eyebrows rose. "A warehouse worker?" "That's correct," Brad continued. "Sarah made the questionable decision to hand our most important project to someone completely unqualified. I've reviewed his work, and frankly, it's amateur hour." Jake felt the familiar burn of humiliation, but this time he was ready for it. "Mrs. Morrison, may I show you what I found?" "By all means," she said, her tone skeptical. Jake connected his laptop to the main screen. "Your original model failed because it was built on corrupted data. Someone inside Sterling Analytics has been feeding you false information for months." The room went silent. Brad Thompson's confident smile faltered. "That's a serious accusation," David Chen said. Jake pulled up his analysis. "Your customer engagement metrics were inflated by 340%. Your retention rates were completely fabricated. Someone wanted your model to fail." He showed them the data trails, the timestamp patterns, the digital signatures that all pointed to systematic manipulation. Margaret Morrison leaned forward, studying the evidence. "Who did this?" she asked. Jake looked directly at Brad Thompson. "The corruption traces back to one source. All the fake data entries have the same creation signature." Brad's face went white. "This is ridiculous. You can't prove anything." "Actually, I can." Jake pulled up the metadata logs. "Every file modification is tracked. Every database entry is timestamped. The evidence is overwhelming." Sarah Sterling was staring at Brad with a look of pure fury. "You sabotaged our biggest client. Why?" Brad stood up abruptly. "I don't have to listen to accusations from some warehouse reject who—" "Sit down!" Margaret Morrison's voice cut through the room like a blade. "Mr. Williams, continue." Jake pulled up his rebuilt model. "I started from scratch using only clean data. Your actual customer base is smaller than you thought, but more valuable. The new model identifies your highest value customers with 94% accuracy and predicts churn with 87% precision." He walked them through the analysis, showing how the new model could increase Morrison Industries' customer retention by 40% and boost revenue by $60 million annually. Lisa Rodriguez was taking notes furiously. "This is exactly what we needed. Our current retention strategies are completely ineffective because we've been targeting the wrong customers." The model also identifies early warning signs of customer dissatisfaction. Jake continued. "You can intervene before valuable customers leave, instead of trying to win them back after they're gone." David Chen ran the numbers on his tablet. "If these projections are accurate, this could transform our entire customer strategy." Margaret Morrison studied Jake carefully. "Mr. Williams, you've presented more actionable intelligence in 20 minutes than we've received in 6 months of work. But I have to ask, why should we trust a warehouse worker over Harvard-trained analysts?" Jake thought about Emma in her hospital bed, about Tom sitting on his cardboard every morning, about every person who'd ever told him he wasn't good enough. "Because I don't have the luxury of being wrong," he said simply. "When you have everything to lose, you pay attention to details that others miss. When failure means your daughter doesn't get her medicine, you don't make careless mistakes." The room was completely silent. Margaret Morrison turned to Sarah Sterling. "We'll reinstate the $20 million contract on one condition. Mr. Williams leads the project. Not as a consultant, not as an assistant. As the project director. Brad Thompson exploded. This is insane. You're going to trust your entire analytics strategy to someone with no qualifications? His qualifications, Margaret Morrison said coldly, are results. Something your team failed to deliver. She stood up and extended her hand to Jake. Mr. Williams, Morrison Industries would like to offer you a consulting contract. $200,000 annually, plus bonuses based on performance. Jake's world tilted. $200,000. More than he'd made in the past 7 years combined. Enough for Emma's medical bills, a real home, a future he'd only dreamed about. There's one more thing, Margaret Morrison added. We've been looking for a new analytics director. Someone who understands that intelligence matters more than credentials. The position pays $400,000 annually, plus equity. Are you interested? Jake couldn't speak. $400,000. It was impossible. It was life-changing. It was everything he'd never dared to hope for. Sarah Sterling was smiling. Before you answer Morrison Industries, Jake, I have an offer of my own. Senior data engineer at Sterling Analytics. $300,000 annually. Full benefits. Stock options. You'd be rebuilding our entire analytics division. Brad Thompson was staring at Jake with pure hatred. This is a mistake. All of you will regret this. But Jake wasn't listening to Brad anymore. He was thinking about Emma, about the promise he'd made to give her a better life. About Tom, who told him good things come to good people. About every person who'd ever underestimated him. I accept Sterling Analytics' offer, Jake said, but I want Brad Thompson fired. Today. Sarah Sterling's smile widened. Already done. As the meeting ended and contracts were signed, Jake's phone buzzed with a text from the hospital. Emma's responding well to treatment. She's asking for her daddy. Jake looked around the conference room at the executives, who were now treating him like the expert he'd always known he could be. In 72 hours, he'd gone from humiliated warehouse worker to senior engineer at a major consulting firm. But the biggest transformation wasn't his job title or his salary. It was the knowledge that he'd proven everyone wrong, including himself. Jake was packing up his laptop when Margaret Morrison approached him privately. Mr. Williams, there's something I need to tell you. Something about how we really found Sterling Analytics. Jake looked up, confused. I'm sorry? Margaret glanced around the emptying conference room, then lowered her voice. Morrison Industries didn't just randomly choose Sterling Analytics 3 years ago. We were specifically looking for Sarah Sterling because of a recommendation. A recommendation from who? Margaret smiled. From my father, Thomas Morrison. He told me about a young man who showed him extraordinary kindness every single day. A man who shared his breakfast and coffee with a homeless veteran, even when he clearly couldn't afford it. Jake's world stopped spinning. Tom? The man outside the warehouse? My father built Morrison Industries from nothing after he came back from Vietnam. But he never forgot what it was like to have nothing. For the past 5 years, he's been, let's call it field testing, potential business partners. Jake sank into a chair. Tom is your father? Tom Morrison? Thomas Morrison, founder and chairman of Morrison Industries, worth about $2 billion. And for 6 months, he's been telling me about the warehouse worker who treated him with dignity when everyone else walked past like he was invisible. The room was spinning. Jake thought about every morning, every shared breakfast, every conversation with Tom about life and kindness and never giving up hope. He was testing me? Not testing, Margaret corrected. Observing. My father believes that how you treat people when you think no one important is watching reveals your true character. He's been right about every business partner he's recommended. Jake's phone rang. An unknown number. Jake? It's Tom. I think it's time we had a proper conversation. 20 minutes later, Jake sat in the back of a black Mercedes, still trying to process what was happening. The car pulled up to a private entrance of Chicago's most exclusive hospital. Tom Morrison was waiting in the lobby, but he looked completely different. Gone were the worn clothes and cardboard. He wore a perfectly tailored suit and carried himself with the quiet authority of a man who'd built an empire. Hello, son, Tom said, extending his hand. I believe we have some things to discuss. They rode the elevator to the top floor, to a private suite that looked more like a luxury hotel than a hospital room. Through the windows, Jake could see all of Chicago spread out below. Why? Jake asked. Why the deception? Tom poured 2 cups of coffee from an expensive machine. Because I needed to know who you really were, not who you pretended to be in a job interview, not who you thought I wanted you to be, who you were when you thought it didn't matter. He handed Jake a cup. Every morning for 6 months, you gave me your breakfast. $8 you couldn't afford. You never asked my name, never asked for anything in return. You just saw someone who needed help, and you helped. Jake stared out the window. I thought you reminded me of my father. Your father was a good man. I looked him up after Margaret told me about you. Staff Sergeant Michael Williams served 3 tours in Afghanistan, died in a car accident when you were 19. You investigated me? I investigate everyone my daughter considers doing business with. But Jake, what I found wasn't what I expected. A young man who dropped out of college to care for his dying father, who worked 3 jobs to pay for his father's medical bills, who's been supporting his daughter alone since she was 2 years old. Tom sat down across from Jake. Do you know what impressed me most? It wasn't your intelligence, though you're clearly brilliant. It wasn't your work ethic, though you outwork everyone. It was your character. In 6 months of watching you, I never saw you be cruel to anyone. Not even to the co-workers who mocked you for helping me. Jake's phone buzzed. A text from the hospital. Emma's asking for you. She's feeling much better. There's something else, Tom continued. Emma's medical bills. They're taken care of. All of them. Past, present, and future. Jake's hands started shaking. I can't accept that. I can't. You're not accepting charity, son. You're accepting payment for services rendered. 6 months of kindness, dignity, and human decency. That's worth more than money to an old man who spent too many years surrounded by people who only see dollar signs. Tom stood up and walked to the window. I built Morrison Industries from nothing. Started with a small construction company after I came back from Vietnam. 40 years later, we're worth $2 billion. But you know what I learned? Success without character is just expensive failure. He turned back to Jake. Sarah Sterling reminds me of myself at her age. Brilliant, driven, but surrounded by people who care more about credentials than competence. That's why I recommended her company to Margaret. And that's why I recommended you to Sarah. You recommended me? Who do you think suggested she attend your interview? Who do you think made sure she was in that conference room when you spotted the data error? Jake felt like the ground was shifting beneath his feet. The whole thing was planned? Not planned. Orchestrated. There's a difference. I couldn't make you brilliant, you already were. I couldn't make you kind, you already were. I just made sure the right people were watching when you proved it. Tom's phone rang. He answered it, spoke briefly, then hung up. That was Margaret. Morrison Industries board just approved a new position. Chief Analytics Officer, reporting directly to the CEO. $500,000 annually, plus equity that could be worth millions if you're as good as I think you are. Jake couldn't speak. But here's the thing, son. Sterling Analytics needs you too. Sarah Sterling is building something special, and she needs someone with your integrity to help her do it right. Tom smiled. So here's what we're going to do. You'll work for Sterling Analytics, but Morrison Industries will be your primary client. Exclusive contract, long-term partnership, best of both worlds. Jake's phone rang. The hospital again. Mr. Williams? Emma's ready to go home. Her new medication is working perfectly, and Dr. Martinez says her prognosis is excellent. Jake closed his eyes, overwhelmed by everything that had happened in the past 72 hours. There's one more thing, Tom said quietly. Every morning for 6 months, you treated a homeless veteran with dignity and kindness. You never knew who was watching. Never knew it mattered to anyone but me. But it did matter. It mattered more than you'll ever know. He placed a hand on Jake's shoulder. Character is what you do when you think no one important is watching. And son, someone important is always watching. As Jake left the hospital to pick up Emma, his phone buzzed with messages. Job offers, congratulations. Interview requests from major news outlets wanting to hear about the warehouse worker who'd saved a $20 million contract. But the message that mattered most was from Emma. Daddy, the doctors say I'm all better. Can we go get ice cream? Jake smiled as he typed back. We can get all the ice cream you want, sweetheart. Daddy's got some good news to share. 6 months ago, Jake Williams was invisible. a warehouse worker struggling to pay rent, stretching his daughter's medication, sharing his breakfast with a homeless veteran because it was the right thing to do. Today, he was the chief analytics officer of a billion-dollar company, with a salary that would change his family's life forever. But the most important thing hadn't changed at all. He was still the same man who'd share his last dollar with someone who needed it more. And that, Tom Morrison knew, was worth more than all the money in the world. Comment below if you believe kindness always comes back to reward you. And don't forget to subscribe for more incredible true stories of people who refuse to give up.